Les damos la más cordial bienvenida a EntéraTE, el espacio de difusión de las actividades institucionales, académicas y de actualización del Tribunal Electoral del Poder Judicial de la Federación. Les invitamos a que se queden con nosotros con más de las actividades realizadas en la Conferencia Global sobre Financiamiento Político. En este programa tenemos la primera parte de los comentarios finales de esta conferencia que se realizó los días 3, 4 y 5 de septiembre en la Ciudad de México. En esta primera entrega, el moderador Daniel Zovatto, director regional para el Programa de América Latina y el Caribe de IDEA Internacional, anuncia la intervención de los primeros ponentes, quienes realizaron un balance de lo expuesto durante estos 3 días de trabajo. La Conferencia Global sobre Financiamiento Político informará y promoverá el debate mundial sobre el financiamiento político proporcionado, un foro en el que los principales actores de Asia, África, Europa, el mundo árabe y América se reunieron para discutir los desafíos más apremiantes del financiamiento político. Quédense con nosotros en esta sesión de trabajo. Comenzamos.
Muy buenas tardes, tengan todas y todos ustedes. Sean bienvenidos a la ceremonia de clausura de la Conferencia Global sobre Financiamiento Político, Global Conference on Money in Politics. Nos acompaña en esta importante ocasión Yves Leterme, secretario general de IDEA Internacional. La asesora económica principal de Iniciativa Política del Desarrollo Económico de África, Obiageli Ezekwesili. El excomisionado presidente electoral de la India, Dr. Quraishi. El secretario de Asuntos Políticos de la Organización de Estados Americanos, Francisco Guerrero Aguirre. Para moderar esta mesa se encuentra el director regional para América Latina y el Caribe IDEA Internacional, Daniel Zovatto. Tiene el uso de la voz en este momento Daniel Zovatto.
Muy buenos días a todas y todos. Un gran placer tenerlos aquí en la ceremonia de clausura de esta importante conferencia global sobre dinero en la política. Les quiero, en primer lugar, agradecer por el compromiso que han demostrado, la participación, sus excelentes comentarios, pero llegó el momento de que podamos tratar de recuperar y sistematizar la variedad de puntos de vista, los diálogos expresados a lo largo de estos 2 días y medio de trabajo. La metodología que los organizadores de este evento le proponemos es la siguiente. En primer lugar, queremos presentarles a ustedes de manera sucinta, a través de 4 relatores, los principales puntos, algunos de los principales puntos que fueron identificados en cada uno de los 4 áreas temáticas en las cuales estuvo organizada esta conferencia. Es decir, cuáles puntos o cuestiones deseamos rescatar, destacar respecto del tema sobre cómo generar condiciones más equitativas en la competencia electoral en materia de financiamiento. Segundo lugar, cuáles son las ideas más importantes que queremos destacar y compartir con ustedes que surgieron de los debates en relación con el tema de la transparencia y de la rendición de cuentas. En tercer lugar, las que tienen que ver con el tema de cómo ayudar diseñando mecanismos efectivos para evitar la penetración del dinero del narcotráfico y del crimen organizado en la política y en las campañas electorales. Y en cuarto lugar, cuáles son las medidas, las recomendaciones que hemos rescatado de los debates en relación con el tema de cómo fortalecer el cumplimiento de las normas y el fortalecimiento de los órganos de control. Cada uno de los relatores que voy a invitar a hacer uso de la palabra lo va a hacer por 5 minutos cada uno de ellos, y una vez que hemos agotado los primeros 20 minutos en cuanto a la presentación de las relatorías, voy a dar el uso de la palabra a los 4 miembros que nos acompañan en la mesa principal, empezando por el doctor Quraishi, quien va a dar su punto de vista respecto de las conclusiones, pero desde una óptica o una mirada de los organismos electorales. Luego va a hacer uso de la palabra Obiageli Ezekwesili, quien va a dar su opinión desde la perspectiva, desde la sociedad civil, y en tercer lugar lo va a hacer Francisco Guerrero desde la perspectiva de una organización regional como es la Organización de Estados Americanos. Luego vamos a abrir un periodo de preguntas, si es que en la audiencia hay no más de 3, 4 preguntas, devolución y respuestas a esas preguntas, y en último lugar va a hacer uso de la palabra el secretario general de IDEA, el señor Yves Leterme, para hacer la reflexión final y el cierre de esta conferencia global. Así que, siguiendo esta metodología, le invito en primer lugar a Marcin Waleski a que nos acompañe y haga la presentación de las ideas principales en relación con el tema de la generación de condiciones de competencias de equidad en materia electoral. Martín.
Thank you, Daniel, and I would like to thank the organizers for this excellent event. In my 5 minutes, I would have to be very selective. Obviously, it is impossible to cover all the aspects which we discussed over the last 2 days. I will not be able to go into depth of our discussions, but I've chosen 3 main issues, and I would like to propose some concrete action points, some suggestions for our future work. Indeed, promoting a level playing field is an art in finding a balance which gives each party candidate a reasonable opportunity to participate in political life and put across political message. Yet recognizing the growing risks associated with state capture and the lack of equality, a number of actions are needed to move forward our reform agenda. And I would like to propose the following 3 points. In one of the sessions, we focused on the issue of misuse, abuse of state resources. And I think more needs to be done in terms of recognizing and addressing the problem of abuse of state resources. An equal level between the incumbent and a challenger are further affected in many countries by the misuse of state resources. Abusing government resources to secure re-election of those in power or over-subsidizing ruling parties is still a problem in many of our countries around the world. Thus, the concrete action point which I would like to recommend is a stronger engagement of and closer cooperation among domestic and international election observations, and this is really needed to properly address this problem. Concrete steps to prevent abuse of state resources need to be reflected in election observation reports, and methodologies to observe abuse of state resources need to be exchanged among organizations working on election observation. The second issue which we've discussed over the last 2 years is the issue of public funding. And apologies, I will not be able to cover all the issues related to public funding. I would like to focus on 2 of them. Allocation of public funding to the traditional parties, often ruling parties, prevents new competitors or small parties from benefiting from benefits of state funding. This could lead to a cartelization of political parties. In addition, in majority of democracies, we see that public opinion is very skeptical about unconditional support parties receive from the taxpayers. Thus, I would suggest that we should engage ourselves in a serious discussion supported by solid research on impact and effectiveness of public funding regimes. The fairness and effectiveness of different public funding systems need to be discussed and good practices promoted among democracies. The third issue, which I will focus on, is the issue of addressing lack of gender equality in politics. Politics dominated by money is politics dominated by men. Lack of financial resources is one of the key barriers for women political participation. Political parties receiving subsidies need to take into account the principle of de facto equality for all candidates, particularly women. Talking about leveling the playing field, we should also keep in mind equal participation of women and men in politics. Allocation of public funding should be contingent on compliance with the requirements for gender equality. Parties which do not subscribe to the principle of gender equality and de facto discriminate women should not be supported with public funds. Gender equality is not only an international obligation in line with CEDAW, Beijing Platform for Action, number of Council of Europe OC recommendations, but it also offers political parties an opportunity to open themselves to women leaders, helping them to become more representative. Then the concrete action point I would like to propose is that gender equality needs to be a principle behind our public funding regimes. We need to collect gender disaggregated data, evaluate how funds are allocated, and ensure that public funds are not used in discriminatory manner. The final point I would like to make deals with spending limits for political campaigns. So we had a session which was dealing with the cost of elections, and we briefly spoke about spending limits. Securing equality between candidates and healthy competition means that reasonable limitation on campaign expenditure may be justified. Particularly, it is necessary when we want to ensure that the free choice of voters is not undermined and the democratic process distorted. Today, out of 170 democracies studied by International IDEA, majority of them contain spending limits, different spending limits, those applying to candidates, to political parties. Yet their effectiveness is often questioned. And no doubts, we certainly need to have more research looking at the effectiveness of spending limits, what are the conditions for spending limits, and how to make sure that they are capturing the whole political process, not just elections. But we should also keep in mind that context matters, and we should be vigilant. Some regimes might be undermining political competition by using some of those issues which I mentioned earlier. For example, the wrong combination of unrealistic spending limits, high threshold for allocation of public funding, and tolerance for the abuse of state resources may lead to unintended consequences damaging multi-party democracy. We should always keep in mind a potential conflict between two fundamental principles of modern democracy: political equality and political liberty. Regulations should be well designed and realistic to ensure that both principles are respected, as together they form the bedrock of any democratic system. My final point would be on our future engagement. Our future proposals for leveling playing field need to take into account public expectations, yet they need to be driven by research and solid evaluation. Thank you very much indeed.
Muchas gracias, Marcin, por tu presentación de los puntos sobre el primer tema, y ahora me gustaría invitar a Magnus Ullman para que nos presente los principales puntos del tema relativo a transparencia y rendición de cuentas.
Thank you very much. I'll present 4 points coming out of the discussions during the last 2.5 days. The first is that while there are many regulations important for solving problems in money and politics, and Martin has mentioned a number of them, most of these depend on at least a reasonable level of transparency. We need to consider the sequencing of reforms, and first of these need to be financial reporting and publication. Most countries in the world have not sorted out that issue yet. Once we have these reports, we need to consider how we can review their accuracy. The second point is that we must recognize the limits of transparency and the limits of what transparency can bring. And I'll just mention 2 aspects of this. The first is that the publication of those who give money to opposition parties can, in certain scenarios, lead to the harassment, even violence against these individuals. And when that is the case, transparency reduces the level playing field. Secondly, political finance reporting is not going to shed light on illicit financing or the role of organized crime. What they do will not appear in campaign finance reports. Thirdly, there is a need to get stakeholders to take compliance seriously. There are many aspects of this. A crucial one is that most reporting systems in the world are developed without consultation of those who are required to submit reports. At the end, the participation of political parties and candidates is necessary for us to get effective disclosure and transparency. I suggest that the discussions at this conference point to the need for us to develop a formal international standard for political finance reporting and publication. This can be using the International Standards on Auditing or the International Standards Organization, as you wish. But this standard should include consultation with the regulated community as a required criteria. The final point is that this standard should recognize the advantages of electronic solutions for financial reporting and publication. Yes, there are some cases where this may not be feasible, but the assumption should be that electronic solutions should be used rather than the other way around. There are 154 countries in the world that have financial reporting requirements. We need to establish in 2015 how many of these publish financial reports online. And then we should strive to double that number in the next 5 years. Oh, and I really mean that about a formal standard for reporting and publication. ISO 37001 is about anti-bribery management systems. Why can't ISO 37002, or ASA if you prefer, be about financial reporting and publication? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Magnus. And now I would like to invite Kimana Zulueta Fulcher to present the conclusions on the illicit funding.
Thank you, Daniel. Let me start by saying that the issue of illicit sources of political financing is getting increasing attention, as is shown by it being one of the topics that we've discussed these days here. But at the same time, at a broader level, the linkage between organized crime and politics, the criminalization of politics or the politicization of crime, as we spoke about yesterday, is also getting increased attention in both the academic and the policy circles. And while in the past 10 years, perhaps, the amount of information available has increased exponentially, I think we can safely say that we're still at a rather initial stage in the process, and that there's much more policy-oriented empirical research needed in this area that would feed into, ideally, into policy making. Still, there are three issues that I'd like to mention about the nexus between organized crime and politics that we need to take into account. The first one is the fact that while politics might be local, organized crime is increasingly transnational, the product of global market and of global demand, where we need solutions at both the local and the global level, from enforceable declarations and resolutions at the UN at the regional level, to specific local policies that increase service delivery and accountability, or even more specific policies on offshore asset confiscation, for instance. Second, some of the key characteristics of organized crime is its dynamism, its sophistication, but also its adaptability to the context at hand, and therefore the difficulty of tackling it once and for all, or the impossibility of tackling it with narrow type of policies. The third characteristic is that organized crime feeds on patronage networks and on weak and maybe corrupt political party systems, which are the bread and butter of most of our countries. And as Robert Gerenges said yesterday, clients are at the mercy of patrons in absence of alternatives, in absence of jobs, in absence of economic autonomy, and it is really a structural problem. But beyond these three characteristics, we've also talked about four more or less specific policies that could help tackle the nexus between organized crime and politics, and I say help tackle because we're all aware of the fact that we will not be able to eliminate this phenomenon. The first and most general one, perhaps, is the need to design long-term civic education curricula at all levels of the educational system. And this will not bring results in the short term, of course, but may in the long term, and we need to take this seriously. Second, the need for both national and international actors to devise mechanisms to incentivize, support, or even put pressure on state institutions in order to achieve judicial independence, including also the independence of anti-corruption bodies, which are of crucial importance, of course. We've heard about the Guatemalan case in the past days, the key role of civil society organizations, but also the key role of the International Commission Against Impunity. Also, the UN Special Rapporteur for judges, the independence of judges and lawyers, has played an important role in other contexts. But key to the impact of these organisms is the role of civil society organizations and investigative journalism in putting pressure from below, in exposing what could be perhaps called exemplary scandals that make sufficient noise to put these issues on the table. Third, and understanding the key role of political parties in both being infiltrated and being the bodies that actually decide on legislation, there is a need to strengthen the link between political parties and their constituents and citizens at large, also by strengthening the internal democratic status of political parties. Some countries have come up with very specific policies, legislations to try to avoid the nexus between organized crime and politics, like the Ficha Limpia or Clean Record in Brazil, the Ventanilla Única in Peru, the Empty Chair in Colombia. You all know all of these policies. Maybe we need more research on how these mechanisms may conflict or not with human rights or rule of law considerations of different types. But these countries have been thinking ahead on these political party regulations in terms of how they interact with organized crime. The fourth consideration is that legislative or regulatory frameworks are no silver bullet, as Mark Shaw said yesterday. They are necessary, but also need constant revision to adapt to the very dynamic phenomenon of the nexus between organized crime and politics. Finally, let me put forward one possible action point for all people present here, which is the clear need for regionally based comparative knowledge on how countries in different regions are trying to tackle the link between organized crime and politics. And there are some organizations who have already started with this type of research. International IDEA is one of them, of course. The Netherlands Institute for Multi-Party Democracy, the Klingendal Institute, the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, and others. But we need to continue with this research. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Kimana, y vamos a invitar ahora a Kevin Casazamora para la presentación del último tema que tiene que ver con los mecanismos de control.
Muchas gracias, Daniel, y un saludo a los miembros de la mesa. Yo voy a transmitir algunos puntos sobre uno de los temas que ha sido reiteradamente mencionado a lo largo de esta discusión, que es el cumplimiento, o más bien el déficit de cumplimiento de las reglas del financiamiento político. Y ha habido a lo largo de estos 2 días y medio un casi unánime acuerdo en que uno de los problemas más graves que hay en materia de financiamiento político es la falta de aplicación efectiva de la ley. Y sobre eso quiero hacer 4 puntos. Lo primero es que no hay que perder de vista cuál es el sentido del sistema de sanciones y del sistema armado para asegurar el cumplimiento. Lo principal de un sistema de sanciones no es imponer las sanciones, sino prevenir las violaciones y fomentar el cumplimiento voluntario de la legislación. Ese es el primer objetivo que debería tener un sistema de sanciones. Y eso implica, para empezar, que los reguladores deberían facilitar información permanentemente a los actores políticos para que puedan cumplir de manera fluida con las reglas. Pero además implica que la eficacia de la fiscalización durante las campañas es quizá la clave si lo que nos interesa es prevenir las violaciones a la legislación. Y dicho sea de paso, sobre esa eficacia de la fiscalización, cuáles son los mejores mecanismos para ayudar a ir descubriendo los problemas que hay durante las campañas, se sabe muy poco. Esta es una materia en la que hay que investigar mucho más. Entonces, pues, la aplicación de las sanciones es, de alguna manera, el último y más indeseable de los recursos. Habiendo dicho eso, no debemos perder de vista que las sanciones no son una alternativa a la regulación, sino un componente inherente de esta. Y John Kithongo lo puso muy bien. La pura verdad es que el elefante en la habitación, cuando hablamos de financiamiento político, es la impunidad. El segundo punto en esta materia tiene que ver con las características del sistema de sanciones, y creo que hay un acuerdo bastante generalizado en que las sanciones en materia de financiamiento político deben ser simples, deben ser disuasivas, deben ser claras, deben ser proporcionales, deben ser variadas y deben ser oportunas. Y quizá el punto más importante en con respecto a esto es que más que la severidad draconiana de las sanciones, lo que es esencial es que el sistema de sanciones sea creíble y que la aplicación de esas sanciones sea consistente.
Los esperamos en una próxima emisión de EntéraTE, con más de las actividades realizadas en la Conferencia Global sobre Financiamiento Político. Soy Roxana Noriega, hasta la próxima.